guys. So I just wanted to do a quick little video of the lab quiz review for week 7, going over endocrine and respiratory. So remember, these are some of the, these are the major endocrine glands that's going to be in the body, right? That's what we've talked about. And then we have some, organs with some secondary endocrine functions, right? As you can see on the right there. However, I want us to focus on literally the placement, right? Like the anatomy of where certain, organs are, certain endocrine organs are, right? And so this will give us a good idea. If we understand this, we'll be, relatively good, right? So A says produces ADH and oxytocin. We know that, right? We know that it's the hypothalamus, right? So the hypothalamus is that organ, right, that is able to integrate neural and endocrine activities, right? So it is the hypothalamus that produces ADH and oxytocin, right? Antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin produced in the hypothalamus. However, it is stored and released in a posterior portion of the pituitary gland. All right, so we got to remember that. And talking about the pituitary gland, we also know that the pituitary gland is also known as the hypophysis. All right, this is the pituitary gland, right? That master endocrine gland, right? It's the pituitary gland, also known as the hypophysis, that sits in that hypophyseal fossa, right? That sella turcica of the sphenoid bone, right? And so looking at C, right? Look, these structures are right on top of the kidneys, right on top of the renals, right? The renal system, right? So they are adrenal glands, right? These are adrenal glands, right? Renal means kidney, ad means on top of, right? Adrenal glands, okay? So D produces the hormones that promote the development of female secondary sexual characteristics at puberty, right? We know that these are going to be the ovaries. Whereas E, right, it produces the hormones that direct the production of the secondary male sex characteristics. And we know that these are going to be the testes, right? So these are just the different anatomical regions for endocrine functions, okay? When we see something like this, we want to remember certain places. So sometimes the images can be a little confusing, right? However, when we look at A is going to be part of that epithalamus. It's actually going to be that pineal gland, okay, that pineal gland. B is going to be pointing at the hypothalamus, whereas C, if you can really see it, is literally pointing to the posterior portion of the pituitary gland. So this would be the posterior pituitary, right? Whereas D is pointing to, right there, the anterior pituitary, right? E shows us an image of the thyroid gland, right? It's in your throat area. The thyroid gland. Whereas, as you can see, F is looking at a posterior view of that thyroid gland. And we know on the back of the thyroid gland, we have the parathyroid glands, right? Like 4 to 8 of them on the back, highly vascularized. G, right? We have that organ that slowly atrophies, right? As you age, that's going to be that thymus, okay? Again, we have this adrenal gland, is also called the suprarenal gland, right? Going to be divided into 2 parts. The outside portion of it is going to be the adrenal cortex, okay? Whereas the inside, right, inside of that cortex, we're going to have the adrenal medulla, right? And you can see this kind of J-shaped organ right there, right? That's going to be the pancreas, right? Pancreas is going to be able to secrete those hormones like glucagon and insulin, right, in response to blood glucose levels. Of course, K, again, those the organ that's going to produce those hormones for the development of female secondary sexual characteristics, right? That's going to be the ovaries, whereas L is going to be those testes. Okay, so remember that. And again, these are just those anterior pituitary gland hormones that's going to be produced, right? Again, these are going to be produced by the anterior portion of the pituitary gland. Okay, thyroid stimulating hormone, adrenocorticotropic hormone, those gonadotropins such as the follicle stimulating hormone, the luteinizing hormone. You got the prolactin, the growth hormone, and the melanocyte stimulating hormone, right? So we give you the hint, right? So we want to name the hormones secreted by the pituitary gland that acts on the target gland or organs, right? So A is also known as somatotropin. We know that also known as somatotropin, right? This is going to target bones and muscles. That's going to be that growth hormone, right? GH, growth hormone. B has no known normal function in men, right? But we know that it's going to target those mammary glands, right? And it's going to be able to produce milk. That's going to be prolactin. Okay. Whereas C is going to control menstruation and the production of sperm. So we can see right there, it's going to be the FSH, the follicle stimulating hormone. D, right, look at this, targeting the thyroid, right, targeting the thyroid, also known as thyrotroponin, right, it's going to be that thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH. And we know E, right, it's, excuse me, it's targeting the adrenal cortex, so it has to be those adrenocorticotropic hormones. Okay? And I don't want you to get confused too. This is going to be the this portion right here, that's the infundibulum. We know the infundibulum is going to be connected to the posterior portion of the pituitary gland. Okay, so just remember that. Whereas the anterior, right, it kind of wraps itself around. Okay, that infundibulum. Yeah, just want to make sure we're clear with that. Okay. All right, next. So, looking at the respiratory, just going over a brief respiratory, right? We know that the respiratory system is going to include the nose, nasal cavity, paranasal sinuses, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, alveoli, right? And we have the upper respiratory system, and we have the lower respiratory system, okay? So, just looking at the pure anatomy of the respiratory system, right? We know that this portion right here is called the pharynx. Oh, Lord. This portion right here, it's called the pharynx, right? We know that B, right, this portion right here, that's going to be called the larynx, right beneath the pharynx. Of course, C is going to be our windpipe, right, our trachea, right, that windpipe. And we have D. So D is going to be those main primary bronchi, right there, the main primary bronchi. Right, and E is actually where it bifurcates, where it splits, right, and it splits at that specific portion called the carina. Okay, so remember that. That's where it splits at. Okay, and looking at here, we have. So we have A, right? The top of the lungs, right? That superior portion of the lungs. That's going to be the apex, right? B specifically is pointing at that right lung, that superior lobe. C is going to be that muscle right there, that diaphragm, right? D, it's going to be really the nasal cavity, right? Whereas E is going to be that pharynx area, right? Pharynx is consisting of the oral, the nasal, and the laryngeal pharynx. And F is going to be the larynx. And that's going to all make up your upper respiratory system. Right? And now we're in the lower respiratory system down here, where we have the windpipe. That's going to be the trachea. Right? We have these main bronchi, right? That's coming into the lungs. Right? Down here we have these terminal bronchioles, right? Right before we get to the alveoli. So we have the terminal bronchiole, and then of course we have the alveolus. Right? And that's again going to make up the lower respiratory system. Okay, so that was just a brief overview of just a few things that we went over in week 7, okay, during the lab portion. Thank you guys for listening.